Welcome to Jewish Wisdom on JTV. We're joined by Rabbi Shlomo Farhi, who's going to speak to us on the topic of the Jewish dream.
You know, on September 2nd, 2015, an image emerged in all the news media outlets at the same time. It was on the front page of every newspaper, a coordinated almost effort that absolutely changed the conversation in this country. You know, up until that point, we in England were dealing with the same question that all the countries in Europe were dealing with. What are we going to do with this massive problem of the Syrian refugees? There's obviously difficult elements to taking them in. On the other hand, how can you not take them in? And as people kept pointing out, specifically in the Jewish community, how could we not be pushing for them? This was once our story. Now, to me, what was fascinating was, with all the reservations and all the questions that were there, legitimate questions sometimes from a security standpoint, you know, you hear ISIS stand up and say, we are smuggling our fighters in these waves of refugees. ISIS are not known for their humor, like, you know, and yet, all of a sudden, an image emerges, and that image changes the conversation. Immediately after that, David Cameron decides that the gates are going to open, 20,000 allowed into England, 24,000 in France, etc., etc., etc. And it struck me that this one picture of a little boy whose name is Alan Kurdi, drowned on a beach in Turkey, changes everything. What was it about this photograph that managed to overcome all the bureaucracy, all the questions, all the concerns that we had? I mean, what was it? And I started thinking, and I remembered that there was another photograph that had actually done a remarkably similar thing. It was on June 5th of 1989, you might remember it, where a young man stands in a square in China, in Tiananmen Square. He stands holding a plastic bag up against 4 tanks. The tanks are rolling towards him. He refuses to move. Until in the last possible moment before they crush him to death, the turret of the tank opens and the conversation begins. A man standing up to 4 tanks. That picture hit the news waves and again captured the minds, the imagination, and the heart of an entire world, forcing at the time the Chinese government to change its policies towards its people. And what I found fascinating about these two things is that they shared one remarkably similar thing. In marketing, they would tell you that it was the ability of taking the suffering of the many, which is unrelatable, and relating it back to the suffering of the individual. We can all relate to one person's suffering. We are, after all, one person. We could superimpose their story on our lives. We could think how that would feel if it were us, etc. But I'd like to say, and I think, that there's actually something else here. Because we've all seen loads of images of war-torn areas, you know, in the crises that are happening all through the Middle East. We've seen pictures of children dying, of individual children. What was different about this photograph? And finally it hit me. Pictures of people in war are faced with the human being's ability to deflect anything we don't want to see with 2 words. You hear these words uttered in family broigases. You hear these words uttered when people who are best friends will fall out over one small thing, and someone will take them to task and they'll ask, what's going on? How could you throw away a lifetime of friendship over the fact that they put you on the wrong table at a bar mitzvah? And you know what they'll say invariably? How come you're not speaking to your mother, your father? It's always the same 2 words. It's complicated. It's complicated is the most wonderful mechanism by which all I need to say are those 2 words, and you can't talk to me about this anymore. You don't understand this. It's complicated. War is complicated. You see an image of a child suffering and you start wondering, well, what if the other side would have had the bombs that side had? You know, what were the Shiites doing to the Sunnis? What are the Sunnis doing to the Shiites? And we can make things more complicated than they are. And once things are complicated, that is our license to just let it go. It's too complicated. We had a picture here that was not complicated. It wasn't a boy at war. It was a boy on a beach, on our beaches, on this side of the conflict, on this side of the continent, if you will. And it was a boy versus the waves, and he lost. Everybody talks about Alan Kurdi. Does anyone know his brother's name who died on the same day from the same boat? There were 12 people who died on that beach. 5 of them were children. And the only name we know is Alan Kurdi. Why? Because there's a moment that's frozen in our imagination of an uncomplicated situation that simply cannot be. The Jewish story is interwoven with so many different dreams. If you're a studier of the Bible, you read about Joseph's dream, and Joseph talks about this dream that he has. His brothers try to squelch it. Ultimately, he gets redeemed by the dream. Jacob has a dream about the ladder, about the ability of a human being to transcend this world and kind of make and live life in a godly way, in a more divine way, not to get caught up in the vicissitudes of every single day, a ladder who's firmly planted in the ground but whose head is in the heavens. We live our whole life in Judaism by the concept of dreams, dreaming of a better day. That has helped us when we were persecuted, that has allowed us to look forward to a time where we would once again be in our homeland in Eretz Israel. We've lived all this time by the dream. But the crazy thing about dreaming is that sometimes if you're a dreamer, you remain in the land of dreams. And the one secret that people need in order to be able to live a dream that actually manifests itself in real life is the ability to make it uncomplicated. What is my next move? What do I need to do right now, right here, because the situation demands that I do something? And if it does, what's my step right now? So people ask me when I talk to them about this idea, they're like, well, doesn't that limit the ability that someone has to dream? If it's so simple, if it's not complicated? And I always say the same thing. You could dream of a skyscraper. But yet if you broke it down to the pieces that you'd need to put into place in order to realize that dream, at the end of the day, you begin with one piece of wood, with one hammer, and one nail. And if even that is too much to contemplate, break it down even further. Lift the hammer up, bring the hammer down. You can't make a difficult phone call, just send your hand out to grab the receiver. And what comes next? Just push that first button. Now just push that second button. We say every day before we do the Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals, we say a special prayer. And on Shabbat we say Shir HaMalot. And we say this amazing line, Shir HaMalot B'shuv Hashem at Shivat Zion, Hayinu Kecholmim. When the Jewish people will be returned to their land, Hayinu Kecholmim, we were like dreamers. What do we mean to say when we say we were like dreamers? The amazing thing about a dream is it's not limited to reality. It's something that scopes out our deepest desires, our deepest wishes. It doesn't take into account all the various steps that I'm going to need to go through in order to get to that dream. It doesn't say, how unlikely is it that the Jewish people will ever make it back to Israel? There aren't any other nations that have been banished completely from their homeland and then have gone back to reclaim it, to become the indigenous population in the land in which they live. We are the exception. We are the dreamers of dreams. And we have the ability, if we so wish, to wake up from a dream and allow it to be our reality. Think for a second of the human condition that we live in today. It is unbelievable. Where once people looked up at the moon and saw this thing that was so far away, didn't understand it. We have been to the moon and back. We've taken remote control cars and planted them on Mars. And if we so chose, we could technically take the explosives that we've developed with our incredible, incredible technology, fly them out to that dream and blow it out of the sky. That is where human beings are today. We can map the DNA sequencing of a person. We can take one drop of blood and identify with precision that this person, out of 7 billion people, is the one who committed a murder. This is where we are. As human beings, we have dreamed and we have accomplished. And yet, in every area of life, there are naysayers. There are people that say to us, it's too complicated. It's too complicated. It's too complicated. We as Jews are the answer to that. We disprove that theorem. Nothing is too complicated. The Mishnah in Avot says, Lo alecha hamalacha legmor. Chapter 2, Mishnah 16. It is not on you to finish the work. Lo alecha hamalacha legmor. Velo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimena. And you are not free, yet you are not free from engaging in that work. If we have a dream, if we will it so deeply, and we do concrete steps, one after the next, we can bring fresh water to villages in Africa that don't have. We can go to places where illiteracy is the order of the day and reverse that trend. We can come up with the answer to diseases that plague humankind. We just have to stop being these people who are afraid of our dreams. And there's something I've been thinking about, and I'll leave you with this line. It's been buzzing around my head for so long. The greatest dreams, unfulfilled, become the greatest nightmares. More than anything else, as humans, we are not afraid of not dreaming. We're afraid of facing ourselves in our final moments knowing that we could have been so much more. We had dreams, we wanted to go, we wanted to be, we wanted to love, we wanted to laugh, we wanted to heal, we wanted to build. And what did we do? All we did was we lived. No one wants to be unremarkable. That is the story of the Jewish dream. It has ever been our mission, our credo. And I think if one applies that lesson to their daily life, they can see wonderful things happen and unfold in front of them.
Rabbi Farhi, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.